The assembly line was invented in 1913 and was a huge step forward for Ford Motor Companies in the engineering world. There is an uncountable amount of triumphs that came from Ford's invention, ranging from the first mass production of the Model T to the creation of unions. But with great triumph comes tragedies. Because of the assembly line, people were put to hard work, doing the same work over and over again for hours until they were sent home to only come back the next day. Some employees were worked so hard for so many hours and so many days in a row, they passed out from exhaustion or were injured on the assembly line. The moving assembly line moved the world forward, solving problems and causing them as it went. Welcome to the world of Ford's assembly line.
In the 19th century, cars were becoming the new thing. Manufacturing was speeding up, and the modern age was fast approaching. The First World War was becoming more and more unavoidable. The radio was just invented a few years before, and the Ford Motor Companies was becoming a powerhouse in the car industry. The Ford Motor Company adopted the assembly line invented by Ransom Olds. Before the assembly line, workers worked on just one car until it was complete, from start to finish. This was the way cars were made for multiple years until Olds' assembly line. The idea of people moving from car to car doing just one job was revolutionary at the time. When it was implemented in Ford's assembly line, it dramatically decreased the amount of time spent on each car. Ford watched his factory work faster with the new assembly line. He had then started the decrease in the building time of each Model T from just 12 hours for one car. But being the intellect that Ford was, he had a new revolutionary idea. He started testing his new idea, the moving assembly line. Little did he know that with this idea, it would be the greatest advancement in technology that would push us into the modern age. He started his testing on the moving assembly line by tying a rope to the frame of a car and then having a strong man pull the car forward and stopping at every station so that the parts could be assembled. Ford's new idea, which he simply called the moving assembly line, made Ford Motor Companies an industrial giant that is still around today. The advancements in the assembly line soon helped not only Ford Motor Companies, but all of America, as the factory soon changed to produce weapons and vehicles to help with World War I and help push the United States of America to become a world power.
Yes, indeed. If a young man makes up his mind to work, there's no limit to what he can do.
The moving assembly line shoved the economic age forward from the day it started. It increased production by 8-fold. The new process revolutionized production and dropped the assembly line time for a single vehicle from 12 hours to about 90 minutes. The decrease in the amount of time it took to make a Model T seemed to directly correspond to the price as well. The cost of the first Model T was set at $850, which turns out to be $21,000 in today's money. The cost of the Model T eventually dropped to $260. There may have been more triumphs than tragedy, but with one triumph came a price. The company increased its wages to $5 for every 8-hour workday, more than double the existing rate for the then standing 9-hour day. But that is all they tell you about it. You may be wondering what can go wrong with a more affordable car and products being more accessible. The conditions of workers who made the car is the tragedy. A worker had to meet company standards for clean living, including sobriety, no gambling, and a happy home environment. Ford actually formed a psychological department whose staff members visited homes to assess workers' worthiness for the $5 a day. The policy would today provoke torch-bearing mobs and picketing lines. Every single worker that worked at Ford Motor Company was tested to see if they were good enough for the pay. The workers just didn't make cars on Ford's assembly line, They also sometimes were forced to make weapons. By the end of the war, Ford built 86,865 complete aircrafts plus 57,851 airplane engines, thousands of engine superchargers and generators, and 4,291 military gliders. The Ford assembly line and its workers made a major impact on the creation of the modern world. They push us to the start of a technological age and into modern warfare.
He must study and work, and he must go back in any art as far as he can, just dig up the very beginning, and the more he goes back, the further he will be able to see ahead.
The short-term impact of Ford's moving assembly line had huge effects on the wages and manufacturing businesses of the day. The company was able to increase its wages all the way up to $5 for every 8-hour workday because they were able to create so much profits from their moving assembly line. They were able to pay their workers way more than any other company because of this, and able to as well drop the price of their main car. The Model T started out as $850, but then dropped to $300, making it affordable for even the middle class to afford a car. Ford was also able to make a Model T every 24 seconds, making the Model T, at that time, the most sold car in the world. The assembly line didn't just help the common man work less for each day, it helped the common man become more modernized. The lasting impact of the moving assembly line will never fade from our lives. The company Tesla Motors and Apple still uses the moving assembly line to this day, along with other major companies that are still around today. The biggest long-term effect of the moving assembly line was the unions that were created from it. One of them was a UAW, which tried in the 1940s to unionize in the Ford Motor Companies. They held a multitude of different rallies to try to change how the Ford Motor Companies was using their workers, but none of them actually ended up working, seeing how Henry Ford was more stubborn than they thought. The union formation came after Ford tried to improve the working conditions of his common workers, which was a part of the $5 per every 8-hour workdays. The improvement was slow and took many years and had large effects on how unions were shaped today. Ford's assembly line was, and still is, the greatest advancement in the engineering world ever. It led to the improvement in speed in assemblies and the way of life, not just in the United States, but in the entire world. The assembly line had some slip-ups along the way, such as the long hard hours worked by all the workers that were sometimes forced to work longer than they should have, and their lives being watched and kept them from living the life they wanted to, and a few problems that are still being solved today. Now, it is time for you to form your own opinions. Did Ford's assembly line overcome all the shortcomings that came with it? Or did Ford's assembly line push forward and drive over the workers' rights?